Hi, and thank you for joining me. I'm going to be talking about past life regression, about breaking ancestral patterns, and evidence that we kind of come back into the same families with each incarnation. So I'll start with the reincarnation and past lives. Personally, if you've ever been to somebody who tells you what your past life is, all you've got is a belief that they're telling you the truth. You don't have any proof. The way to really get details about your past life is to do a hypnotherapy session with somebody who specializes in past life regression. So they will take you back to, they just guide you back into your lives. You're the one that is in control. You're the one that will choose which life you're going to go back to. And you, when you're in a hypnotic state, my words aren't coming out this morning. When you're in a hypnotic state, you'll see a story. You'll see a whole story unfold. So you'll go back to a certain time and you'll see a story unfolding in that time. And that's part of the recall that you have, that in your soul record holds all that information. And through hypnosis, you can go back into that time. So I just want to share an experience that I think I may have spoken about this before, but we come back into the same kind of families, or we meet the same kind of people depending on whatever was happening at the time. So when I did a past life session, this was years ago, and at the time I was married, and I've only ever been married once, so it was only to the one person. So in the session, I went back. First of all, I went back to a life where I was a young boy, and I could see myself running around about the age of 8, and I had no shoes on, and I could just see that I was poor, and I could see I lived in England, and I was running on dirt roads. But it was the time before that. I went back to a time when I was a young woman, and I sort of looked like I was only, say, 18, 19, 20, sort of around quite a young woman's age. And the clothing that I was wearing and the decor that was around me felt very much like it was in the USA, and it was in the time of the North and South War. And the women were wearing quite full dresses. They were tight in the waist. They were off the shoulder. Our hair was sort of pinned back and in ringlets. And I felt like the way I was dressed, and I was, the part that I went back to in my hypnosis, I went back to being in a gathering where people were dancing, and I looked across the room and I saw a young man who was in uniform, and I felt like maybe we were just getting to know each other, and we had a lot of chemistry between each other, and I felt like he was going to be my husband, and I'm presuming he thought I was going to be his wife. And we had this connection. And in my hypnosis session, when I looked at him, I knew it was the same soul that was in my husband at the time, in this lifetime. It was the same soul. I just knew, like I knew him. And I knew that we were meant to be together. I knew that we were meant to be a couple and go through something together. And then from that picture that I had of the gathering, it was like a party, there was people dancing, and I saw him, and at that point I knew that that was him. Then I flashed to what happened to me in that life, and I died by falling off a balcony. And I saw myself fall off a balcony, and that is how I came to my death. And I was only a very young woman. So I thought to myself, when I came out of the hypnosis session, I knew that I had known my husband in that day, today. I knew I'd known him in a past life. And in that past life, we were meant to be together, but I died. Unfortunately, I died early. So our souls, when we'd left that era, returned to source energy, our souls would have made a contract or an agreement with one another to find each other again in another lifetime and complete that task of being together, which we did in 1981. In this lifetime, we found each other again, and we married. And after 30 years, I left that marriage. Now, this is another subject I want to sort of talk about. We have what our soul wants us to do, and we have free will. And our free will can go against what our soul wants us to do. Now, my soul may have decided to marry this man and stay married to him till death do us part. My soul may have agreed to that. His soul may have agreed to that. But my ego self, my human self, has changed course. Now, because I've changed course and walked away from the marriage, and not till death us do part, that may mean that in a future incarnation, we will find each other again and come back to and find each other again, and then go through another relationship again until it goes till death do us part. And we could keep coming back and doing that in each incarnation, because it's just something that these two souls have chosen. But the really, really hard part is when you're listening to your ego self hurts, because the ego self doesn't see the bigger picture. The ego self doesn't see the past incarnations and the future incarnations. The ego just sees what is happening right now. And so if, when our marriage parted ways, it's hurtful because the ego can't control it. But there is something so much bigger going on. And also, something I read yesterday, and it just made so much sense to me. Because of all our past lives, what happens is when you're going through things in your past lives, you're learning something. Now, if you look into the past, men have basically controlled women. Women were not allowed to vote. Women had to stay in the home. Women didn't have any sort of power for many, many, many centuries. It was like this. Women were not allowed to speak up. They had their place. And men were taking the role. Women were at home with the children, and men were taking the role of being out in the workforce. And men were controlling the countries. And men were, women weren't even allowed in a bar. There were so many restrictions for so many years. And with this new energy that's changing our consciousness and changing the way we think, there is a lot of souls that have been born into the bodies of women in this lifetime that have decided to break that ancestral pattern. So they are leaving men. And this is a lot of women between the age of 30 to 60. In that age bracket, there is a lot of women that are leaving, just leaving their partners and not needing to go and find another partner, to surviving on their own, to being independent on their own. They are breaking an ancestral pattern. So, and the thing is, again, it's heartbreaking for men or women, but if the woman has made her mind up to leave, then she's not going to be as heartbroken as the person who's getting left, because they're the one that are feeling rejection. But if their soul knew this, their soul also has agreed to come into this world as a man and know that that's going to happen, because the soul will accept any kind of lessons. It's when we're here, the ego is the one that gets hurt. The ego can't deal with it because the ego doesn't like those difficult emotions. So there is a lot of this breaking the ancestral pattern where women are controlled by men or not allowed to do things by men or have a place. And it's this rising up of the feminine energy. You'll also find that a lot of men that have been born in the last, say, 40 years are a lot more emotional, are a lot more sensitive, and they share tasks with their partners. Like, back, if you read anything from the 50s or 60s, the woman had to do everything at home and the man just came home from work, sat down, put his feet up and was catered for. That doesn't happen. The men that have been coming through in the 80s and beyond are different in their nature. They help women. It's equal. They both want to care for the kids. It's not just mum doing all the work. I mean, not in every circumstance, but that's generally, you'll see that men are a lot more sensitive. They are not afraid to speak up about their emotions. And it is, they are changing. You know, the dynamic of the male is changing. And there's so many more women going into roles in higher roles in workplaces and into parliament. We've even got, you know, prime ministers, female prime ministers. So it is changing, but this particular energy that's been happening between 2020 and 2025, where there's this huge rise in consciousness, is definitely making, it's in that whole 5-year range that women are just leaving partners. And you can even look at them and say, why would they want to leave? They may have had a great relationship with their partner, but it's just this overwhelming pull or a drive or this overwhelming feeling within the woman that she has to go. Unless you've ever felt that overwhelming emotion that takes over, that you just have to do something, even though you know it's going to wreck things and things are going to fall apart, you still do it. You just do it because you know you just have to do it. It's such a deep calling that, you know, but then you also have that choice. You have that really deep knowing that I'm meant to do this, I'm meant to walk away, I'm meant to do this, but then you also have the ego that can change your mind. The ego can say, well, I'm not ready, you know, I'm not strong enough. But so if in past lives you had two people, and it doesn't matter if you were partners in past lives, if you were a mother and daughter, or sisters, or father and son, or whatever your dynamic was, if you lost contact with each other in a past life, or if you couldn't agree with one another, or you couldn't accept that who they were and they couldn't accept you, you had conflict, it's more than likely that those two souls will decide to come back again and be in the same family and work on that conflict. And it may happen that the same conflict happens again. Let's say something that someone did to you just irked you, it just triggered you, you just couldn't understand why they were like that, and it just annoys you. And you couldn't learn to just let them be. You gave away your power all the time. You gave away your power to them and you let them have the power over you. So you will come back in another lifetime and the same thing can happen again. And it's up to you and it's up to the other person. You're both learning. It's up to you to learn to get along. That's why you keep getting put together. And so you can choose to get along in this lifetime, and you can choose to allow them to just be who they are, not give away your power, and it'll stop that karmic cycle where you have to keep coming back in every lifetime to repair it. So I often say to myself, if I've got a problem in this lifetime, it's better off to deal with it right now than have to come back again and have to deal with it again in the next lifetime. I mean, there's obviously people that are going to come into your life and there's going to be conflict and then they go away again. I'm talking about family, because families will come back, and you quite often hear a child will, but say that they were a grandfather in the previous life, or they were in that family and then they come back into the same family. It's a comfort to know the same souls, to keep coming back into the same families and around the same souls. And the thing is, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh my God, I don't want to come back into my family again, that's your ego. Because you're forgetting that The ego and the personality is only created by you in this lifetime. When you lived in a previous lifetime, you didn't have the same ego and you didn't have the same personality. And every single incarnation that you've had on this earth, you've had a different personality and a different ego. And it all depends on how you're brought up at the time. It depends on your environment. You create your personality depending on the environment that's around you. So if you grew up in a war time as a child, your personality is going to be a hell of a lot different than if you grew up in this lifetime and had all the luxuries. It's just the way it is. So you can't look at someone in your family that you don't, or someone close to you that you don't get along with now, and think that when they're born again, they're going to look the same, they're going to have the same personality. No. When someone comes back into a new life, they are fresh. They look different. They will create a different personality. So will you. The lessons can be the same, but your personalities will be different. So you probably deal with it in a lot different way. I think sometimes we get so caught up in just this life. Like, what is happening to me in this life? It's because you're here. You're here in the physical, on earth, at this time, trying to work it all out. There is this so much bigger picture that's going on that we forget about. Like this little life that you're here for, say you're here for 80 to 100 years, if you're lucky, it's such a small period of time from the evolution of your soul that may have been coming back to Earth for 200 years, or 500 years, or 1,000 years, or like even longer. This is just such a tiny little part of your whole evolution, but because you're here today in the physical, all you see is the egoic problems that are around you. I read this absolutely wonderful, let me look it up. I read this wonderful quote by Eckhart Tolle. He must have posted it on Valentine's Day. Let me just find it. Okay, so it said, what is commonly called falling in love is in most cases an intensification of egoic wanting and needing. You become addicted to another person, or rather to your image of that person. It has nothing to do with true love, which contains no wanting whatsoever. And it is so true, because we do things because we want something in return. Can you just, I've said this before, you know how you love your children unconditionally. You just love your children. You don't expect anything back from them, especially when they're little babies. When you've got a little baby in your arms and you're loving that little baby, you don't expect that baby to do anything for you. Obviously they can't because they're little. But then when we get to be adults, when we fall in love with someone, we expect them to treat us a certain way. We expect them to give things a certain way. And we fall in love with what they give us. We fall in love with the feeling that they're giving us. And we fall in love with the image, the whole image of what it all looks like. And it is a form of love, but it's called conditional love. We place conditions on that love. It is a form of love, but it's not a real deep, true love, because that's unconditional and that you don't expect anything in return. It's like when, I've said this before, like if a woman, say in the 1960s, found herself to be pregnant, and at that time it was too difficult, maybe she was 16 years old and too difficult for her to care for that child, so she puts it up for adoption. That's true love. That is giving your child an opportunity to go on and be cared for in a way that you can't care for them. And for the rest of their life, that mother that's given that child away will just love that child, but the child's not in their life. The child's not giving anything back to them. They have freely given away their own child because they feel like that child's going to have a better chance at life. That is a selfless love. That is an unconditional love. And most of us find that really, really difficult because most of us want something in return. We want to keep, I would find it so difficult to give away my children because I want to keep my children because I need love. I need love around me, and I need them around me. I need the whole image of a family. I love the image of family, and I love the image of what things give to me. So it's not that it's a right or wrong, it's just understanding that there is so many different levels that we can feel. So I think I got way off topic there. But yes, our souls quite often come back into the same families. We go through same experiences, or we go through different experiences, or we have to try to get along with people that we didn't get along with in previous incarnations. And have you also noticed how many women are leaving men, especially between the age of 30 and 60, or even a bit before and after that age, and don't really need to go into another relationship, are quite happy on their own, and are trying to break karmic patterns that happened in their past, especially if you came back as a woman many times, because you can come back as a man, a woman, an animal, a plant. But if you came back as a woman many, many times and you had a very domineering partner with you for many, many previous lifetimes, is it this lifetime that you've decided, or in the last couple of years, have you decided, I'm going to break that karmic pattern and be a woman in my own right without being controlled by a man? So yeah, drop a comment below if this resonates, or what your experiences are with coming back into the same family, and I'll talk with you soon.